One of the other ones that can sometimes show up, I often see this in ornamental plantings and areas that are just completely unmanaged, is the black knot, Apiosporinum morbosum. And it makes something that looks kind of like a thick, hard gall over the shoots of the trees. It's really a fungal stroma, and it's just filled with tons and tons of spore-bearing structures. It's very hard. You could hurt someone with it if you hit them with one of these things, so they're not soft, squishy, but this is a really nasty bit of stromatic tissue that's very tough and very woody. And it will form itself inside the branches. You can imagine that these particular shoots aren't in good form. The infections actually happen around bud burst. Once you start to get those buds popping open and you can start to begin to see the first bits of white, but they won't actually mature and make spores. So if you see one of these in your tree, that means your management has failed probably about 2 seasons ago. And if you think, well, I cut all of these out, you'll need to keep cutting, because once you've seen this is infections that have occurred for about 2 seasons. What this will end up doing, it will cause a lot of loss of bearing wood. You'll have to cut all these things out of the tree. Otherwise, it'll just continue to snowball until the entire tree is just a bunch of knots. And they'll arrest growth of the tree, reduce productivity, a real problem fungus, if you will. What do you do to manage this one? Well, the first thing to do is inspect all of your planting material. And if you see any galls, and at first they'll be kind of a bronze, they'll look like the bark of the tree itself. It'll get all the stone fruit. It won't just get cherries, but I often see it in ornamental cherries, but I've seen it peach, plum. It seems to be, you can see there's a picture here on plum. Here's a planting there, and you can just see all the little tiny galls. So when you get new planting material, look for any abnormal swellings on any of the material that you get. When it first leaves out, look for any, it'll have the same bronzes color as the bark itself on the trees. Look for anything that looks swollen and quickly remove it. And the idea is that you prune all the branches with the knots and take them off site. Burning is always best, but you can't always burn things. There is a 2-season lag. So if you're cutting this off or you're cutting all these things off, and you can see here, it's almost too much. There's so many knots all over all of these trees. The best thing to do would be to use the front end loader and replant next year, because you're never going to get it all. There's so many little ones. And then there's a 2-year lag, and you'll just feel like you're never able to keep up with it. And it's so labor intensive. If you don't have this situation, I wouldn't even recommend fungicides at this point. I would say time to get rid of them and start over. Then if you're on point with a good program, and a lot of these things that you use for brown rot and other diseases will manage this one as well. Start at fungicide at bud burst, green tip, and it's most susceptible from that white bud stage. We'll sort of like slowly go back. You don't need to see the speed of this. Right there, white bud stage, right there to shuck split. So this is where some of the real magic is going to happen for that black knot. So we'll go back again. Yeah. And then chlorothalonil, it's a fungicide that we can use in stone fruit, but we're not allowed to use in apples. Highly effective on this, but the problem is that after shuck split's over with, no more chlorothalonil. The DMI fungicides are also particularly effective. Things like Endar would be one of the ones that comes to mind for stone fruit. Inspire Super, I believe, is also labeled for stone fruit as well. These would be really good to put one of those in at that time, even though you might want to save them for your cover sprays later on.